Ethan Hale sat slouched in the security break room of Heathrow International Airport, staring blankly at his trembling hands. The fluorescent lights above flickered softly, buzzing faintly, casting sterile white light over the blood-stained sleeve of his uniform. His arm was wrapped in a fresh bandage, crimson already seeping through the gauze and patches. Outside the glass door, the terminal hummed with life. Footsteps clattering across polished tiles, rolling suitcases, distant boarding announcements echoing through the concourse. Life at the airport went on as if nothing had happened. But inside Ethan, everything had changed. "Ethan," came a quiet voice from the doorway. It was Alex Cooper, his colleague and closest friend on the team. Alex stepped in cautiously, his face lined with concern. "You okay, man?" Ethan gave a faint, tired smile, but his lips quivered. Yeah, I'm okay," he whispered, though even he didn't believe the words. His gaze dropped back to his hands. The tremor worsened. A wave of heat flushed through him, followed by cold sweat beating on his forehead. He felt it coming. The unraveling, the crash. "They're all waiting outside," Alex said softly, pulling up a chair beside him. "Linda McCarthy from Airport Security, Mark Reynolds, the airline CEO, press. Everyone wants to talk to you." Ethan's chest rose and fell faster. His ears buzzed, his vision narrowed. "Aiva," he murmured hoarsely. "I almost lost her. I was 1 second away." Alex placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "But you didn't. You saved her." Ethan's throat tightened. His eyes welled with tears, and before he could hold them back, the dam broke. He lowered his head into his hands, sobbing uncontrollably, his shoulders shaking with the weight of the day crashing down on him. All the adrenaline, all the fear he'd pushed down to act, now spilled out in raw, messy release. "God, I was so scared, Alex." His words dissolved into heaving breaths. Alex kept his hand firm, quiet beside him. "It's okay, man. It's okay to let it out. You did good, Ethan. You did damn good." For a few long minutes, Ethan wept into his palms while the world outside kept turning. Planes boarding, passengers boarding, reporters waiting. And still, he sat, falling apart for the first time since he ran from his post to save the little girl who'd silently begged him for help. 3 hours earlier, Ethan Hale stood at security checkpoint A17 of Heathrow International Airport, his arms folded tightly across his chest, eyes sweeping across the sea of travelers funneling through metal detectors and baggage scanners. It was early afternoon, and the terminal thrummed with its usual mix of chaos and order. Families herding excited children, businessmen pacing while muttering into Bluetooth headsets, elderly couples clutching passports and shaking hands. For Ethan, it was all familiar noise. He'd been doing this job for nearly a decade now. A former police officer turned airport security officer, he'd seen his share of fake IDs, nervous smugglers, and drunken belligerents trying to talk their way onto planes. Nothing shocked him anymore. Or so he thought. But today, something felt off. His gaze locked onto a figure moving through the crowd. A well-dressed man in a tailored navy suit, pushing a sleek carry-on with one hand, his other hand gripping the shoulder of a little girl who walked beside him. The girl couldn't have been older than 8. Pale complexion, wisps of blonde hair escaping a loose ponytail. She wore a pink long-sleeved shirt and jeans, her small backpack slung low on her back. At first glance there was nothing unusual. Except, there it was again. That grip. It wasn't guiding. It wasn't affectionate. It was restraining. Ethan narrowed his eyes, instinct kicking in. He stepped slightly out of his station, positioning himself for a clearer view. "Uncle, my arm hurts," the girl murmured softly, barely audible over the crowd. The man didn't break stride. "Stop whining. We're almost there," he hissed under his breath, squeezing her shoulder tighter. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd seen that look before, the way victims froze under the weight of control. He remembered it from domestic calls back when he walked the beat. That mixture of fear and resigned silence. The pair approached the passport desk. The agent asked routine questions. "She's my niece," the man explained smoothly, flashing a warm smile as he presented their documents. "Her mother's in the hospital. I'm escorting her back to Manchester." The girl nodded automatically when the agent glanced at her. But Ethan noticed something, a hesitation, barely a beat, before she responded to the name Sophie. It wasn't enough to trigger alarms for the agent, but for Ethan, it was a hairline fracture in the man's polished facade. The agent stamped their documents and waved them through. Ethan watched them move toward the security line. "Something's not right," he murmured under his breath. "Hey Ethan, you good?" called Alex Cooper from the next station. "Yeah," Ethan replied absently, but his focus didn't waver. He watched as the man positioned the girl between himself and other travelers, blocking her from view. His hand never left her shoulder. Every time she adjusted her backpack strap, his grip recalibrated, keeping pressure on her. Ethan's eyes flicked to her clothing again. The long sleeves, the way they slid up slightly when she shifted, exposing faint bruising around her wrist. He felt a cold spike of dread. "Come on, Ethan, maybe she's just shy," Alex said casually, following his line of sight. But Ethan wasn't convinced. His pulse quickened. "Watch," Ethan whispered. As they neared the conveyor belt for carry-on screening, the man leaned down close to the girl's ear, whispering something too low to catch. Her shoulders hunched further. And then, she glanced up, right at Ethan, their eyes locked. In that instant, everything else faded. The chatter, the footsteps, the announcement overhead about boarding at gate 22. It was just them. The girl raised her hand slowly to her temple, brushing a strand of hair aside. But then, instead of dropping it, she made a deliberate gesture. Her fist closed, then opened, then pressed against her opposite palm. Ethan's breath caught. The signal. It was subtle. To anyone else, it looked like a fidget, an absent-minded movement. But Ethan had seen training videos, attended seminars, the international signal for help taught to children when they couldn't speak aloud. He swallowed hard. "Control," Ethan spoke into his radio, his voice steady but urgent. "This is Hale at A17. Possible child endangerment. Female minor approximately 8 years old in custody of adult male. Requesting immediate surveillance. Suspected trafficking. Over." Static crackled. "Copy that, Hale. Hold position. We're monitoring. Do not engage without confirmation. Backup en route." Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to control the surge of adrenaline flooding his system. "Hold position. Do not engage." He looked back at the girl. Her gaze hadn't left him. Her hand had dropped, but the message lingered between them. "Please, don't let him take me." The man adjusted his grip again, steering her toward the secondary screening lanes. Ethan's radio buzzed. "Backup arriving in 5. Repeat. Do not approach. Wait for confirmation. 5 minutes." 5 minutes was an eternity. The man glanced over his shoulder. His eyes swept the room, calculating. He whispered again into the girl's ear. She froze briefly, her small fists curling tight. The man began angling them toward an emergency stairwell beyond the checkpoint. Ethan's muscles coiled. 5 minutes. He wouldn't have 5 minutes. He looked again at the girl. Her lips trembled, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. And suddenly, Ethan wasn't standing at Heathrow anymore. He was back at home, picturing his own daughters, Emma and Charlotte, laughing in the backyard. Imagining what he would want someone to do if it were them standing there, silently begging to be saved. "Ethan?" Alex's voice drifted beside him. "Orders are clear. Stay put." But Ethan's fists clenched. A voice inside him thundered louder than any protocol. "If you wait, she's gone." He dropped his radio onto the desk and he started moving. "Ethan, don't!" Alex's shout faded behind him. He ducked under the security ropes, pushing through startled passengers. "Sir!" one of the junior agents yelled. "You can't leave station." But Ethan's focus had narrowed to a single target, the man leading the girl swiftly toward the side exit. "Stop!" Ethan's voice rang across the concourse. Heads turned, cameras lifted, voices buzzed. The man's head snapped around, his smile evaporated. For a heartbeat, their eyes met across the terminal floor. And Ethan saw it, the flicker of recognition, of knowing. The man tightened his grip on the girl's arm and ran. "Control, suspect fleeing toward exit near gate 17 with minor." Ethan barked into his radio, "Pursuing on foot, immediate response requested." "Units inbound," the radio answered. Ethan sprinted. The man shoved past a family blocking the aisle, knocked over a rolling suitcase, yanked the girl forward when she stumbled. Ethan vaulted over the fallen bag, dodged between startled travelers. "Let me go," the girl cried. "Quiet," the man snarled, dragging her faster. "Don't touch her." Ethan bellowed. Passengers gasped. Someone began filming. Ethan closed the gap, his boots pounding against polished tiles. The man reached the emergency exit, fumbling for the handle. Ethan threw himself forward, tackling him hard into the metal door. They hit the floor with a heavy crash. "Run," Ethan shouted to the girl. She scrambled backward, tears streaming down her face. The man twisted beneath him, elbowing Ethan's ribs. Ethan grunted, grappling for control. And then, a flash of steel. The man pulled a knife from his jacket. Ethan's instincts snapped into overdrive. He pivoted, feeling the blade slice across his forearm, burning hot and wet. He grabbed the man's wrist, slammed it against the floor. "Drop it," Ethan growled. The knife clattered free. Security officers burst onto the scene, weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them," they ordered. Ethan pressed the man's face against the ground, gasping for air, blood dripping from his sleeve. "Suspect disarmed. Minor secured," Ethan reported breathlessly. "Request medical." He looked up, scanning frantically. And there, Aiva Morgan stood trembling behind a pillar, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide and shining. She was safe, but the world around Ethan spun, sounds blurring into muffled echoes. He felt hands pulling him up, voices praising him, radios buzzing. He felt the warmth of blood seeping through his uniform, but none of it mattered. Not until he saw her run into the arms of a waiting officer. Not until he saw her smile, broken, fragile, but alive. And only then did Ethan's knees buckle, his breath hitch, and the weight of everything crash over him. He'd saved her. But at what cost? The paramedics worked swiftly. Ethan sat slumped against the cold wall of the terminal, his back pressed against the polished tile, his injured arm outstretched as a medic cleaned and dressed the wound. Bright lights flashed overhead. Security officers cordoned off the area with retractable belts. Curious passengers filmed the scene from a distance. His ears rang. He could still hear her voice, "Let me go," echoing inside his skull. "You were lucky, mate," the medic said quietly, wrapping fresh gauze around his forearm. "Another inch and he would have hit the artery." Ethan nodded vaguely, watching the crimson soak through the bandage like slow-moving ink. His hands had stopped trembling, but inside, the adrenaline still ricocheted like a stray bullet. Across the concourse, he saw Aiva Morgan sitting with a female officer, sipping water from a plastic cup, her tiny hands wrapped around it like a fragile bird. Her face was streaked with tears, but her chest rose and fell steadily now, each breath less shaky than the last. Her eyes met his across the distance. She offered a tentative, exhausted smile. Ethan's throat tightened. "She's safe now," the medic reassured him. But Ethan wasn't sure safe was the right word. Not yet. Not after what she'd endured. "Mr. Hale?" He looked up. Linda McCarthy, director of airport security, approached briskly, accompanied by a man in a tailored suit, Mark Reynolds, CEO of Aerovista Airlines. Both looked serious, controlled, professional, but not angry. "Not yet." Linda crouched beside him. "You okay?" "Yeah," Ethan said automatically, though his body screamed otherwise. Mark Reynolds knelt too, glancing at the bandage, then at the child across the terminal. "Ethan, I wanted to thank you personally. That little girl's family, they'll owe you forever." Ethan blinked slowly. Is she with her parents?" Linda shook her head. "Not yet. They're being flown in from Manchester, should be landing soon." Mark sighed. "We're lucky she signaled you." "We're lucky you noticed." He paused. "But we need to talk about what happens next." Ethan felt the weight of that sentence settle onto his shoulders. He knew what was coming. "There'll be an investigation," Linda continued carefully. "You left your post without authorization. You violated protocol. You abandoned your checkpoint in an active security zone." Mark cut in gently. "But at the same time, you saved a life. And thanks to you, we stopped a trafficker before he left the country." Ethan swallowed hard. "Do what you have to do. I'll accept whatever's coming." Linda's expression softened. "We're not here to punish you, Ethan, but we have rules for a reason. We can't pretend they don't matter." Mark nodded. "There's already media interest. Passengers filmed everything. It's gone viral." Ethan flinched. "Viral? Global." Mark held up his phone, showing a headline, "Airport security officer breaks protocol to save kidnapped girl, hero or rule breaker." 3 million views, hundreds of thousands of comments. Ethan stared at it, numb. "We'll need a statement," Mark said quietly. "Press conference, maybe." Linda added, "And mandatory trauma counseling. That wasn't just a physical incident, Ethan. You're going to feel this later." Ethan glanced back at Aiva. The girl had curled up under a security blanket, resting her head against the officer's shoulder, eyes fluttering shut for the first time. "She's alive," he murmured. "Yes, she is," Linda said softly. "Because of you." Ethan leaned his head back against the wall. He closed his eyes, and for a fleeting moment he allowed himself to feel something close to peace. 2 hours later, the terminal quieted as the evening rush tapered off. News crews had arrived, hovering near cordoned lines, cameras aimed toward security headquarters. Inside a private lounge, Ethan sat near a window overlooking the runway, his arm freshly stitched, his uniform replaced by a clean polo shirt provided by staff. He felt hollow, wrung out, half present. "Mr. Hale?" He turned. A couple stood at the door, mid-30s, disheveled, both trembling. "Ava's parents," Linda introduced gently. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan." Before he could rise, Sarah Morgan rushed forward, collapsing into his arms with a sob. "Thank you. Oh my God, thank you." Her husband, David, stood behind her, wiping his eyes. "We didn't think we'd never see her again." Ethan hesitated, overwhelmed. She saved herself," he managed. "She made the signal. She was the brave one." Sarah pulled back slightly, gripping his hands. "But you saw her, you didn't look away." David joined them, folding Ethan into a three-way embrace. "You gave our little girl back." Behind them, a security officer arrived with Aiva wrapped in her blanket, still drowsy. "Mama?" Aiva whispered. Sarah turned, breaking into fresh tears. "Oh, baby!" Aiva ran into her mother's arms, burying her face into her chest. David enveloped them both, tears streaming freely. Ethan watched silently, his chest aching with a strange cocktail of relief, sorrow, gratitude, and exhaustion. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Aiva peeked shyly over her mother's shoulder. Is that him?" she asked. Sarah nodded, brushing her hair back. "That's Mr. Hale." Aiva wriggled free and walked over. She stood before him, small and brave. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan knelt carefully, ignoring the pull in his stitched arm. "No, Aiva, you saved yourself. You were so brave." She hesitated, then threw her arms around his neck. Ethan held her gently, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "You're safe now," he murmured. "You're safe." The next morning, Ethan sat outside Linda McCarthy's office, his hands clasped in his lap, his badge lying beside him on the bench. He'd barely slept. The headlines screamed across every screen in the terminal. "Heathrow hero, security officer saves kidnapped child." Social media was ablaze with praise. Airline unions debated policy reviews. Travelers posted selfies outside his checkpoint, calling it the spot where a hero broke the rules. But inside Ethan, the night had been heavy. Dreams of the knife, the flash of steel, Ava's terrified eyes, his own blood staining the floor. "Ethan?" Linda's voice called him in. He stepped inside. Mark Reynolds was already seated. Linda gestured to a chair. "We've finished the preliminary review." Ethan sat quietly. "Under protocol, you should face disciplinary action for abandoning post," Linda said evenly. Mark added, "But the review board unanimously recommended no formal punishment." Ethan blinked. "We can't set a precedent for breaking protocol," Linda explained, "but we also recognize that sometimes protocol isn't enough." Mark smiled faintly. "The airline board would like to commend you publicly. They're offering paid leave, full counseling support, and a permanent role in our new Guardian initiative, a task force to train staff in recognizing trafficking signs." Ethan inhaled shakily. "We want you to lead it," Mark said. "With your instincts, you're exactly who we need." Ethan exhaled slowly, a small, tired smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I'd be honored." Linda leaned forward. "Take your time. Rest. Heal." He nodded. But in his mind he saw Aiva again, smiling, free, alive, and for the first time since yesterday the weight in his chest eased. "Thank you," he said softly. Mark stood, extending his hand. "No, Ethan, thank you." As they shook hands, Ethan felt it, the price of breaking rules, the burden of doing right, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes saving one life meant changing many others. Ethan sat quietly in the back of a black car, staring out the window as the airport terminal faded behind him. His left arm rested in a sling across his chest, the bandages tight but clean now. The press conference had ended an hour ago. Questions hurled at him like darts. "How did you know? What made you break protocol? Do you think others should do the same?" He'd answered carefully, politely, truthfully. But inside, he felt hollow. "Dad?" He turned at the small voice beside him. His daughter, Emma, age 8, mirrored Aiva in ways that made his heart ache. Blonde curls, wide green eyes, a backpack covered in stickers. "I saw you on TV," Emma said softly. "Mom showed me." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah? You saved that girl." He nodded. "Her name's Aiva." Emma chewed her lip. "Were you scared?" Ethan swallowed. His gaze drifted back to the window. "Yeah, honey, I was really scared. Emma leaned against his good arm, quiet for a moment. Mom said you broke the rules. I did. Is that bad? Ethan hesitated, then looked down at her, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. Sometimes rules help us do our jobs, but sometimes we have to decide what's more important. Emma frowned thoughtfully. Saving people is more important. Ethan's smile softened. That's what I thought too. The car pulled into their driveway. His wife Claire waited by the door, arms folded tight across her chest, relief and worry etched deep into her features. As Ethan stepped out, Emma ran to her. Claire wrapped their daughter in a fierce hug, then turned to Ethan. You're home, she whispered, her voice thick. I'm home, Ethan echoed. She reached up, cupping his face, her thumb brushing a bruise near his temple. God, you scared me. He leaned into her touch. I scared me too. She pulled him inside. You need rest. But Ethan paused at the threshold, glancing back at the setting sun over the rooftops. Somewhere, Aiva Morgan was also home, safe in her parents' arms. And for tonight, that was enough. The next day, Ethan stood quietly in a hospital waiting room, holding a small stuffed bear wrapped in cellophane. He hadn't planned to come, but he'd woken that morning with an ache in his chest that wouldn't leave. A nurse waved him in. She's asking for you. Ethan stepped softly into the pediatric room. Aiva sat propped up against pillows, coloring in a sketchbook, her thin arms still mottled with fading bruises. She looked up and smiled. Hi, Mr. Ethan. Hi, Aiva. She patted the bed beside her. Want to sit? He approached carefully, settling down at the edge. Brought you something. He handed her the bear. Her face lit up. He's cute. Figured he could stand guard while you're here. Aiva hugged it tightly. I feel safe now. Ethan's throat tightened. I'm glad. Aiva turned a page in her sketchbook. I drew you. She held up a crayon drawing of a man in a security uniform standing tall beside a smiling little girl. Above them in blocky letters it read, My Guardian. Ethan swallowed hard. That's really good, Aiva. She beamed. Mom says you're a hero. I'm just a guy who saw you, he said quietly. And you? You're the bravest person I've ever met. Aiva looked down at the drawing. Do you think other kids will learn the signal now? I hope so, Ethan said. I really hope so. Days passed. The video of Ethan's intervention continued to circulate. News anchors praised his instincts. Parents reposted guides to the silent hand signal. Airline safety trainings began including his story. And every day, Ethan read emails from strangers. Because of you, I taught my daughter the signal tonight. I'm a flight attendant, and now I'll be watching for this. You didn't just save Aiva, you saved who knows how many. It humbled him, overwhelmed him. And yet late at night, when the house was dark, he'd lie awake, replaying the moment the knife flashed, the weight of the man beneath him, Aiva's terrified eyes. Claire would slip beside him, pulling him close. You did everything you could. I know, he whispered, but it doesn't feel over. Maybe it's not, he sighed. I'm tired, Claire. I know, she murmured, but you're not alone. A week later, Ethan visited Aiva again, this time in her family's garden in Manchester. She ran barefoot across the grass, her laughter like wind chimes. He sat beside Sarah Morgan on a patio bench, watching Aiva weave daisy chains with Emma and Charlotte. She sleeps through the night now, Sarah said quietly. Therapist says that's rare, says she's healing faster than they thought. She's tough, Ethan replied, a warm pride swelling in his chest. David Morgan joined them, handing over iced teas. The police found evidence linking him to other missing children, he said grimly. Aiva's testimony won't be needed. She won't have to relive it in court. Ethan exhaled slowly. Good. They watched the girls playing under the afternoon sun. Aiva looked up and caught Ethan's gaze. She waved shyly. Sarah smiled softly. She talks about you a lot. Ethan chuckled. Hope it's the good parts. David placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. She calls you her guardian. Ethan's throat tightened. She's the one who saved herself, he said again, almost a mantra by now. Later, as he prepared to leave, Aiva ran up to him with a folded paper in her hand. Made you something, she said, eyes shining. He opened it to see another drawing. Ethan in his uniform, a little speech bubble saying, I see you. Below it, her careful handwriting read, Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Ethan knelt, pulling her gently into a hug. You were never invisible, Aiva. Not to the right eyes. He pulled back slightly, holding her shoulders. Promise me something. What? Promise you'll remember how brave you are, that you'll never stop being brave. Aiva nodded solemnly. I promise." And as he watched her return to her family, laughing with his own daughters under the setting sun, Ethan realized some bonds, forged in a moment of crisis, endure a lifetime. And sometimes, breaking the rules wasn't breaking them at all. It was answering to something higher, something deeper, something called humanity.